Pledge of Allegiance.
Heavenly Father, we'd like to thank you for gathering us all here this evening, getting us through our day safe and sound. We ask that you continue to watch over our family, friends, close loved ones. Also continue to watch over our service men here and abroad as they continue to fight for our safety and our freedoms. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the Monday, August 7th, 2017 City Council meeting. I will now call this meeting to order. Mrs. Powell, roll call, please.
Fitzwater.
Here.
Graham.
Here.
Henry.
Here.
Hussey.
Here.
Kemna.
Here.
Mahalovich.
Here.
Prather. Schreiber. Ward.
Here.
Wiseman.
Here. Item 3, is there a motion for adoption of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Before we move on to miscellaneous agenda items, I'd like to recognize our Boy Scouts who are in the audience this evening. So if you'd like to come forward and give us your name and what school you attend and what merit badges you're working on. Welcome. We're very happy to have you here tonight. And I know earlier today, Devin called me and we went over some questions about infrastructure and funding and how things are funded. So I appreciate you asking the questions and we're really glad to have you here tonight. Welcome. Thank you. Item 4, miscellaneous agenda items. We have the presentation of the Purple Heart signs by Jeremy Amick and Purple Heart veterans. So Mr. Amick, you're welcome to come forward, and I also have a proclamation that I'll read, but if you would like to share a little bit about the Purple Heart.
Yes, Mayor, members of the council, thank you for having us here this evening. Just to kind of give a little bit of background, last several months I've been working on a book about Missouri monuments, memorials, specifically those that are related to our military history. And in traveling throughout the state of Missouri, especially in southern Missouri, I've noticed a lot of the Purple Heart city signs. So I did a lot of research, and I discovered that Jefferson City became a Purple Heart city in 2013. However, we never received the signs. And I spoke with the mayor, and she kindly reaffirmed the city's support for 2017, again affirming the city to be a Purple Heart city. Now we have worked with the Jefferson City Veterans Council, who has agreed to purchase 5 Purple Heart City signs for Jefferson City to cover the major entrances into the city. And tonight I'd like to have some of our veterans, and some of these are Purple Heart veterans, come up to present 2 of these signs to the city. The gentleman in white is Mike Chick. He was in the Army and wounded in Vietnam. Behind him is Dick Woods, who was also in the Army and wounded in Vietnam. Also like to have Don Hinches come up too. Don is the president of the Veterans Council. He was also wounded in Vietnam and received the Purple Heart. And Ralph Calberow, who certainly deserves a Purple Heart, served with the U.S. Army Air Forces and the Army Air Corps, was held as a prisoner of war during World War II. I'd also like to recognize and have Tom Ward and Phil Califf come forward, because they are very active with the Veterans Council and the VFW and have helped make sure that these signs could be purchased to be placed at the entrance to the city. General Hank Stratman as well, if he wouldn't mind come forward. He's very active in Veterans Affairs and been very supportive of everything we've done to honor our local veterans. Chuck Lawmeyer, good friend of mine, also a U.S. Army veteran's here tonight. And if I miss anybody, I apologize. But we'd be happy, Mayor, if we could hear the proclamation, especially I'm sure these Purple Heart veterans would greatly appreciate it.
Well, we are honored to have all of you here tonight at City Hall, and very honored also to have the designation as a Purple Heart City. So I'll read the proclamation, and then afterwards we'll get a picture together with everybody. So thank you for your service, first of all, to our great country. Thank you. This proclamation states, whereas the city of Jefferson has always supported its military population, and whereas the Purple Heart is the oldest military decoration in present use and was initially created as the badge of military merit by General George Washington in 1782, and whereas the Purple Heart was the first American Service Award or decoration made available to the common soldier and is specifically awarded to members of the United States Armed Forces who have been wounded or paid the ultimate sacrifice in combat with a declared enemy of the United States of America, and whereas the mission of the Military Order of the Purple Heart is to foster an environment of goodwill among the combat wounded veterans and members of their families, promote patriotism, support legislative initiatives, and most importantly, make sure we never forget the sacrifices of our nation's Purple Heart recipients. And whereas the city of Jefferson metropolitan area has a large, highly decorated veteran population, including many Purple Heart recipients, and whereas the city of Jefferson appreciates the sacrifices our Purple Heart recipients have made in defending our freedoms and believe it is important that we acknowledge them for their courage and show them the honor and support they have earned. Therefore, I, Carrie Turgeon, Mayor of the City of Jefferson and the State of Missouri, do hereby proclaim Jefferson City as a Purple Heart City and encourage the citizens of Jefferson City to show their appreciation for the sacrifices made by Purple Heart recipients in defending our freedoms, to acknowledge their courage, and to show them the honor and support they have earned. So first, I want a standing ovation here for you all for your service. Thank you very much to all of you. It is certainly our honor to celebrate you and to have the Purple Heart City designation. So now we will get a photograph. So you can all come forward here and we'll get the city seal and the council members behind.
Let's be real.
Thank you again, and when we get those signs hung, we'll ask Matt to let us know so that we can maybe get a press release out or some information so the public will know where they are and how they're placed whenever you do that. Thank you again. Item 5, public hearings. Item A, CID public hearing. Okay, Mr. Molman.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a public hearing related to the Bill 1739, which is establishment of the St. Mary's Hospital Community Improvement District. Be appropriate for the public hearing to be opened and to take comments on this bill.
Mm-hmm. All right. So at this time, would we want to invite Mr. Kingsbury and his representatives forward to make a presentation? Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Cord Maxwell with the Polsinelli Law Firm appearing today on behalf of F&F Development. We did submit in a CID petition to the council and are here on that today. We would be happy to listen to any comments that any member of the public would have and can wrap up our thoughts about the CID with the rest of the presentations that will be given by staff and the applicant for the many other items that we have related to this project on your agenda. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Of course, would stand for any questions of council now or later as well.
Thank you. Are there any questions at this time? Okay, thank you. Mr. Molman, do we have anyone else that would need to make a presentation before we open the public hearing portion? Anything to add at this time? Okay. At this time, why don't we open the public hearing? And if we have anyone that would like to speak to this issue for Bill 1739, if they would like to come forward at this time.
This is on the, I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble hearing. Is this on the St. Mary's TIF? Is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Sir,
It's Bill, yes, excuse
it's
me.
Bill 1739. It's on the Community Improvement District.
Okay, so this is not about the TIF? The St. Mary's
the,
TIF?
the Community Improvement District is a constituent part of the development plan that also includes the TIF, but the public hearing is just on the Community Improvement District.
Okay, so we're later going to have a hearing on the TIF section?
There won't be a public hearing on the TIF section. It's just a regular bill, so it will be available for comment in a regular due course like any other bill would be. But this is the only public hearing this evening, and it's on the Community Improvement
Well,
District.
will I be allowed to speak at some time on
Yes,
about
sir.
the TIF?
Yes, sir.
So
When
I
will that
think
be?
to clarify, that would be under item 9. Would that be correct, Ryan? Oh, and has he signed it? Okay. Why don't we sign it?
That's correct.
Okay.
Perhaps,
So,
sorry, I was just going to say, perhaps it might be worth clarifying the CID and the purpose of that quickly, and then differentiate that from the TIF, which is an item, two action items on later on, maybe just for the purpose of the hearing.
The Community Improvement District relates to a political subdivision proposed to be established within the bounds of the old St. Mary's Hospital site. Its sole function in this plan of development is to impose a 1% sales tax. That 1% sales tax will be used to pay for reimbursable project costs related to development of the St. Mary's site, which includes both private structures and public infrastructure. The petition to establish the CID is within the City Council's packets, and part of the CID is the determination of blight, and so that is attached to the CID. So essentially what we're looking at here is approval and establishment of the Community Improvement District, which would then give them the ability to impose a 1% sales tax to pay for project costs.
And that's and that's a sales tax on the area within that district.
Yes, it'd be.
And the tax increment financing public hearing was held at the TIF Commission, I don't remember the date, but whenever that would have been earlier.
That's correct.
so
Are
if
you mean to tell me that there's not going to be any input before the council on the TIF?
There is, and that would be under item 9, under presentations from the gallery on specific bills, so we'll make sure that you can speak
Would you
to that
please?
bill. Sure, we'll have you on there. Thank you. So this would be the public hearing for the CID for the Community Improvement District. So is there anyone else this evening that would like to speak on that item? Okay, seeing none, we will close the public hearing portion of the meeting, and we will take up council discussion in Bill 1739. Did you read it already? No. Does she need to, do we take that up now? Does she read the bill now, Mr. Mulman?
Let's take it up as a package with the rest of the TIF,
Okay, so no need to-
TIF and SID items, if that's the pleasure of the
So
council.
after closing the public hearing, any further action at this time, or we'll wait till we get to 1739, correct? Okay, thank you. Item 6, appointments by the mayor. We have appointments to the following boards and commissions on the list. Mrs. Strope.
Thank you, Mayor. We have 2 appointments to the Police Personnel Board, Dan Clint and Stacy Backus. We have 1 to Historic Preservation Commission, Nathan Percy, 1 to the Parks and Recreation Commission, Chris Leichel, 1 to the Cultural Arts Commission, Mitchell Woodrum, and 1 to the Plumbing Board of Examiners and Review, and that's Brent Haas.
Okay, are there any questions this evening on appointments? Is there a motion to approve the slate of commission appointments?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. And I believe we do have Mr. Dan Clint is in the audience this evening, so thank you for being here and serving. Are there any other appointees here that I missed that are here? Thank you. And then also at the last meeting, we had Mr. Brent Haas here as well, so thank you. Item 7, presentations from staff, consultants, and invited guests. Item A is kind of been a recurring item on our agenda, regarding the eclipse. Do we have anyone here this evening from the CVB that would like to speak to that? I know Diane has come and made presentations, so I will announce that if the public would like more information, they can go to www.capitaleclipse.org for all of the activities and information. It's hard to believe that it's 2 weeks away, literally 2 weeks from today on a Monday. So, in fact, we will have our next council meeting will be 2 weeks from today on the big eclipse day. So, as everybody knows, we are in the path of totality, so we will go completely dark during that time. And if everybody has not yet purchased or received their eclipse glasses, you definitely need them. So make sure that you get them. And I know that we do have some competitions who can get the most selfies and pictures with our eclipse glasses. And I think I'm ahead, but we definitely want to make sure that the public is aware and knows that they do need these. The Convention and Visitors Bureau is selling them for $2, so you can get them at their offices or you can purchase them online at capitaleclipse.org. So the city also is participating. I know that we've been very supportive of the eclipse with all the visitors that are coming, and there are countless activities and events in the weekend leading up to that, including events that Saturday night in the downtown area and at the Capitol, and Sunday there's Breakfast with an Astronaut, if it's not yet sold out, where people can actually meet a real astronaut. As we know, NASA will be broadcasting live from the capital city on Monday. We're one of the few cities in the country that they will actually be here. NASA will be here broadcasting live. So check out the website for more information. Make sure you have your glasses, and we'll be prepared to go dark on the 21st. And I notice we have a hand up. We don't typically take public comments, but did you want to?
I just wanted to say that East Side Association is working very, very hard and has many activities on the
That is true. Good point. Yes, East Side Association is having a total eclipse of the park event, so definitely check that out online as well. They're working hard for all kinds of different events in town, and appreciate the East Side and all the volunteers. I know CVB is still looking for volunteers, so you can contact them at 632-2820 if you're interested in becoming an eclipse volunteer. So we will look forward to that. Next time we meet, we'll have all kinds of stories to share about the eclipse, right? Anything to add on that from council? All right. Item B, Mr. David Grellner will give us a report on the Cemetery Resource Board, presented by Nancy Thompson and Tim Theroff. We always appreciate our volunteers to our boards and commissions. Welcome for our annual report.
I brought with me Tim Theroff and Nancy Thompson of our Cemetery Resource Board tonight. They're going to give a brief presentation on the wonderful works they've done this past year at the Jeff City Cemeteries.
You have to say when to click.
Go. Members of the Cemetery Resources Board, I'd like to introduce you to them. If you will please stand as I call your name and remain standing. I'm Nancy Thompson, Chair. This is Tim Theroff. He's the Vice Chair. Pat Roker, Rebecca Gordon, Jeannie Rutledge, Dawn Hackman, Beth Bach, And Mark Schreiber is our council liaison. Thank you for your service to the public. Okay. The Cemetery Resources Board, it was founded in 2011. It currently oversees Old City Cemetery, Woodland Cemetery, and Longview Cemetery. We are to assure proper operation and maintenance of the cemeteries, review maintenance contracts, identify resources, and use expertise to enhance the cemetery conditions. Their goals are to preserve and enhance Jefferson City history, improve the cemetery landscaping, restore damaged gravestones and monuments, improve record keeping, improve safety for visitors, and honor Jefferson City's founding families. In that light, we do, to honor the founding families, we had last summer had a walking tour of Woodland Old City Cemetery. This year we had a 4th of July display with biographies of some of the historically prominent people in Jefferson City, and this was on display here in the City Hall for the week prior to the 4th of July, and then we moved the display down to the Governor's Gardens for the 4th of July itself. Next week we will be setting up a display at Southwest School for their academically advanced students. It's called their Exploration, Enrichment, and Research Group. This will include biographies of individuals at Woodland Old City Cemetery tied to existing residential and commercial properties still standing in Jefferson City. The focus on this educational opportunity is to create critical thinking and creative thinking, as well as develop research skills. Then these students will be taken on a walking tour of the cemetery in mid-September. This past year, our projects included repairing this badly eroded area toward the back of the cemetery. It's along Miller Street. Several temporary measures were attempted without success, so this past year they did a massive overhaul and hauled in some dirt and corrected the drainage problem, and I think it's fairly well arrested. We also installed a new water hydrant in 2016. The old one was balky. You had to kick it to get it to operate, and the only thing came out was rusty water. We don't drink it, but it's helpful to the people who work out there to have fresh water. These are some of the stones that we had restored this past year. Go ahead. And this was another one that we did. One of our big projects this year was to partner with the GIS students at Lincoln University in mapping the Old City portion of the cemetery. It's something that had never been done before. Dr. Samson Tesfaye and his research assistant, John Haslag, brought 7 students over, and in the course of about a month and a half, they laid out the cemetery, put it on a map, and it is now on the city's website. It is a searchable map. The Gone But Not Forgotten Memorial, thanks in part to a generous donation from the law firm of Cook, Vetter, Deeroff, and Landwehr, we were able to engrave 18 additional new names on this Gone But Not Forgotten Memorial. We have also been researching the possibility of adding QR codes to the gravestones. This would enable self-guided tours through all 3 of the cemeteries. We figured out how to do it, we just haven't figured out how to pay for it. We haven't found anything that's really cost-effective and are concerned about any potential damage to the tombstones, so we're proceeding with this cautiously. We are making application for gravestones honoring veterans buried in this cemetery, veterans who don't have tombstones. We're also working to identify other potential veterans there. Michelle Brooks has had a personal research project ongoing to identify the veterans of the 62nd U.S. Colored Troops that helped found Lincoln University. And through her work, we have identified 4 additional veterans of that group that are buried at Old City Cemetery in unmarked graves. We hope to be able to get gravestones for these very shortly. We continue to do beautification of the cemetery grounds. Flowers down in the Old City portion of the cemetery have done well, not so much up in the woodland area, so that is going to have to be redone and replanted this fall. Longview Cemetery, we continue maintenance and record keeping there. In the distant past, 4 cemeteries have been moved into Longview from elsewhere in the community, so we are continuing to reconcile those records with information that we have on file. Our future projects include repairing unstable gravestones. The board has voted this as their first priority. 24 stones are slated to be repaired this fall, and we are getting bids for a similar size block to be repaired hopefully before spring. We met with Amanda Burke with DNR to get her advice on the historical restoration of the more complex tablet stones. There'll be a picture later on, but there are about 20 of those that need to be repaired. They are flat stones that are large and on the ground, and the mowers have driven over them for the last 40 years, and so they're pretty bad shape. We are also going to be repairing the Herrick family grave plot. We received a $5,000 donation from the historic city of Jefferson that will allow us to do this repair work. We are in the process of tying up the bid and contracting to get that done. We also received a $2,000 donation from the Thomas Lawson Price Foundation, and we're trying to decide how best to spend this money. We are looking to get bids for repainting and repairing the iron fences that are out there. The door on the Clark Mausoleum needs to be repaired or actually replaced. We are getting bids for that. There are stone walls around family plots that need to be put back in place. They have crumbled, and if you want to go on with, I think there's some pictures of some of this. This is the table stones that I was telling you about, tablet stones, and they're quite large, and so we're going to be getting bids on how best to do that. And this is a Herrick family plot that we are in the process of having repaired or getting bids for repairs. And then these are other stones. If the stones are not put in place, not set, they have the lighter ones that are easier to carry. Kids pick up and carry them around the cemetery, or else they carry them off. So it's imperative that we get these set as quickly as we can. And back up a line bit.
I'm sorry.
These are the walls, but there we go. There we go. Now we got it. This is just an example of the walls. Several of the plots toward the back of the cemetery, the ground is very shallow back there and rocky, and so families built rock walls to surround their burial plots and filled them with dirt and did the burials there. Over time, these walls have crumbled and fallen, and some of the rock has been thrown into the woods behind, and some is just in place as this is. But we feel that after getting these bids on the work that we need to have done out there, we'll get a better handle on what it's going to actually cost us to stabilize and restore these two cemeteries. Are there any questions?
Thank you for that great presentation. The Cemetery Resources Board is a very active board, and the members, I know, work very hard, and we appreciate all the work that our volunteers do. And I know Councilman Schreiber could not be here tonight, but definitely would want to convey his support for this. And I think it's great to see all the projects and the before and after and the impact that you're making in the community. And it's also great to see businesses such as you mentioned, Cook Vetter, Deerhoff, and Landwehr that has also contributed, and seeing some of the other upcoming projects. Maybe some of the media might want to pick some of that up and do a story where other businesses that may have interest would also come out and support, much like they did to support some of these wonderful cemeteries and resources in our community as well. But thank you for all of your work, and I'll ask if council has any questions. Councilman Hussey?
Just a couple questions. The law firm that they do the names of remembrance or whatever, and you said they paid for 18. Are there more names that need to be engraved on?
About 350.
Okay. And what's the cost of usually doing a name? I'm sure you pay per letter or something like that.
We have one person that is able to do that, and he has just raised his price $60 per name.
Per name.
To engrave them. And if we do have any, if we should proceed to a certain point, we're going to require more stones to put them on. Yeah. So.
And then my second one was about the 4 soldiers from I think you said the 62nd Regiment. Have you determined their grave sites yet and made progress to order gravestones, or is that still?
We have not
progress?
proceeded with that.
Okay.
And that is still a work in progress. We don't know where they're buried. If you've been out to that cemetery, that whole end of the cemetery is like an open field. But we have set aside an area that, where a very large, very old tree was taken down, so we're reasonably comfortable that no one is buried there. And so we would propose that these veteran stones be mounted in a memorial fashion on one single lot.
Okay. And yeah, with that, such a strong tie to Lincoln, I would certainly think that'd be a great idea. And maybe we can pull some strings over at Lincoln University to.
Well, we feel
get some
strongly about
funding
that.
to assist with that.
We are hoping maybe that we can get them to take an interest in that, because it's a very important part of their history.
Yeah.
And appreciate the work that Michelle Brooks has done in helping us in researching this. It's a project that's important to her as well. So
Yeah, it's an important part of all of our history.
it is.
So,
It is.
Thank you. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Tim.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions? All right. Thank you for your service.
you.
Appreciate helping our city with that commission. Item 8, announcements by mayor, council, and staff. We have 4 committees, and their calendars and agendas are listed at jeffersoncitymode.gov. Are there any committee reports this evening? Councilman Mahalovich?
The budget committee meetings will continue this Thursday at 5:30 in this room, and then the following Monday as well.
Great, thank you. Any other committee reports or committee meetings? My announcements for the evening are mainly, again, reminding everyone of the eclipse, capitaleclipse.org, and that we are having a council meeting that evening. We did discuss the possibility whether that should be moved, but the items that are on the agenda, some of them have been already noticed for the 21st, so therefore we'll be moving forward, and that is our regularly scheduled meeting date and time anyway. So after having some discussion about that, we are going to keep it on the 21st, and a lot of those items, they come through a couple of months earlier that end up on the agenda. So since people are aware and they know that it would be Monday the 21st, that way it would probably cause the least amount of confusion if we leave it the same, since that would be a somewhat regular business day here at the city. So that is going to remain the same from Monday the 21st. However, reminding everyone that the following council meeting is Tuesday, September 5th, due to the Labor Day holidays. So Tuesday, September 5th, not Monday that week. So just reminding everybody of that change. And also that I want to announce that at an upcoming council meeting, we are going to invite the interim president of Lincoln University, Dr. Middleton. We're looking forward to welcoming him and his wife here, and we are glad to have them. I know Councilman Graham, with your position as interim chief of staff, we're glad to have you in that position, and really do look forward to welcoming him when it fits in his schedule to a future council meeting. So those are my announcements. Again, capitaleclipse.org for all of the eclipse information. Any other council announcements? Okay. Item 9, presentations from the gallery on specific bills or resolutions. And we do have some signed up here. So why don't we take up, we have so far 2 signed up. We have Mr. Ken Thanen. Welcome. If you'd like to come forward to speak on specific bills or resolutions this evening, and that is limited to 5 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you, Major Turgeon and council people. I really appreciate the opportunity to come up here and speak to you. I want to speak basically to the fire sprinklers for anything 3 units or more. I had attended a number of the meetings. Basically, I was told that their concern was really not to be concerned about the economic or the growth of aspect. They were just looking at the codes themselves, and so they really didn't consider that. So I hope that I ask that that you all be open to considering the broader spectrum of what I see some of the issues are with this code. The first thing I'd like to point out is the financial impact on single family or on these units. One of the things is that if you look at this, if this was passed in 2016, it would have had zero impact, because if you look at the building permits of units that were being built in 2016, there was only one building permit for that type of unit, and it was for actually 52 units. Now, in the apartment business, this unit is considered a non-market rate product. And so, in essence, it's government funded, and in those situations, government is already requiring there to be sprinkler systems in there because they're getting money from federal government. So basically, in 2016, there was no market rate rent being built. Right now, the main reason for that is because of economic factors. The rent rate here in Jeff City will not support building new units at all, and adding more to it really doesn't help the matter. The second issue is as a realtor that, recently I know that the city's worked with the realtors to have a fair housing class. Well, to me, this is kind of one of the issues. One of the main ways they talk about to avoid discrimination is treating everybody the same. Well, when you come in and say, okay, anybody who's going to live in 3 units or more, you're pretty much hitting a demographic that is younger people or lower income people, a lot of times medium income people that are working class people for market rate rent. And so you're saying, okay, these people have to spend an extra $25 a month rent or their costs, where single family and duplex owners do not have to pay that. And so basically, if it's sprinklers are good for one, it would really be good for across the board to avoid that discrimination. One of the things I think that there's one of the reasons I bring the discrimination issue up is if you look at some of the signs that the city, consequences of the city kind of discriminating against multifamily, if you look through zoning, there's very little. What happens is anything over 3 units can only be built in an RA1 or LRA2, and there's very little undeveloped land for projects like that in the first place. But if you look at the demographics, Jeff City's demographics from the ages of 14 to 34, we really drop way down. Well, I think a lot of it is because there's not housing here for them. I've had people come up to me and tell me, I come to work here and I decided to rent an apartment in Columbia because I couldn't find an apartment down here. And that's one thing. If you look at the unemployment rate, our unemployment rate is 3%. We don't have a big workforce here, but we also don't have a lot of housing here. There's not, because if you go back and look, there has not been any new apartment complexes built in this city since the 1980s, and except for Cherry Creek, and it started out as a condo, went bankrupt, and wound up as an apartment complex. But there has really not been any new apartment complex being built since 1980. These are all signs that the city has not really worked at trying to provide housing and apartments. A lot of this is being taken place outside the city limits, but a lot of this would be better handled if a lot of these units, because if you get a higher density in the city, it's easier to provide services, and it's just a healthy growth for the city. And you compare us to Columbia. I mean, there's apartments right and left all the time being built up there, but not in Jeff City. You wonder why. Well, I'm saying that I think it has to do with some of the attitude of the policies that go on in the city. So,
thank you, Mr. Thanen. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you. Next we have Mr. Williams, and then followed by Mr. Cole. Mr. Williams, regarding 2017-37.
I apologize for my misstep. This is the time to speak about the St. Mary's TIF? It is?
That is correct.
Okay, well, I want to congratulate the council on planning for the future. Unfortunately, you're planning for 1968 and not the 21st century. If you're going to look at retail in the next few years, say 10, 20 years, the information I gave you will give some idea, and it's not with shopping centers of any kind. It's with companies like Amazon, Jet.com, Walmart.com, all the others. Virtually all the chain stores around here have a .com, and that's where people are more and more buying. You have a study. It's of course bogus, like all the studies around here. The Farmer Brothers gave somebody some numbers, and they regurgitated them. And of course, the Farmer Brothers get the benefit of any doubt. No mention ever made of the internet or its influence. There's a plan. The only way this plan can work is if citizens give $6 million to it. Well, maybe it's the wrong plan. Maybe they need to change the plan. If you're building a house for $500,000 and you find out that you don't have $500,000, you're probably going to cut it back and make it more reasonable. No more bricks and mortar stores are needed. No mention is made of the Farmer Brothers bricks and sand and gravel and asphalt that they're going to use in that building, and they're going to sell it to themselves, probably at least at cost, at market cost, market value, I guess I should say, and maybe even more than that. You're going to say, don't shop there. Well, in a year or two, nobody's going to know where your money is going. They're not going to know that the Farmer Brothers are ripping off part of each sale, and you don't know it. I bet none of you can really absolutely say for certain what stores are in a TIF and which are not in Jefferson City. Steve Korsmeyer's experience at Pier 1 demonstrates that, and I hope you're all familiar with that. Why don't you let citizens vote? Well, the answer to that is it'd be defeated right out of the box. This is just a continuation of the transformation tax, which lost by 20%, and so you're not going to let us do that, or let the citizens do that. They're not; these are not people that can be counted on to do the right thing. I'm afraid you're not either. As if you didn't know, here's what's going to happen. None of you are going to ask me any questions. None of you are going to have any comments. You're not going to disagree with anything I've written there. None of you will give any reasons why citizens should give millions of dollars to the Farmer Brothers. That was the case with the TIF Commission. I was there. The Capitol Mall TIF Commission a few years ago, and the Mall City Council. The only comment was Bob Scribner's, which was about as firm as cotton candy, meant nothing. You're lowering the bar from tax and spend that you Republicans have been moaning and groaning about for years to tax and give away. Or maybe I should say steal and give away. Everyone here will vote yes, give no explanation, stand up and walk out. The people of Jefferson City deserve better, much better. Before the period vote, there was a lot of detailed explanation, back and forth. There won't be any in this one, I can pretty well guarantee you. And this explanation is simple and obvious. You cannot give a good reason to approve this sales tax. That building has been there for over 100 years, looks substantially the same, and if nothing's done, it will probably look substantially the same. There are a lot of empty buildings in Jefferson City, not besides that one. One of them is the jail's half empty, and taxpayers are paying, every time you buy something in Jefferson City, you're paying for an empty building. Does it make sense for people who live paycheck to paycheck to pay a hidden tax to the richest people in town? I don't think so. Does it make sense for the city council to ignore the most important change in retail that has ever occurred, that is the internet? No, absolutely not. Does it make sense for every member of the council to avoid giving a reason for voting yes? I don't think so either. Yes, ma'am. Just as I expected. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. I'm here tonight basically as John Q. citizen. I'm not on anybody's payroll. I'm not being paid for this. My only fault is Jason Turner has my cell phone number. So, as being here as John Q. citizen, my past experiences with the State Fire Marshal's office for 28 years, and the last 10 of those 28 years, I was your State Fire Marshal. During those years, hundreds of Missourians lost their lives to fire, with the vast majority of those being in home occupancy settings. One that I want to tell you about involved a woman trapped in a southern Missouri rural apartment building on the 3rd floor. While she was trapped there, she was on the phone with a 911 operator. Our investigation of the fire included listening to the call and her pleas for help as the fire progressed. However, the fire progressed to a point the firefighters were unable to get to her and control the fire. And on that phone call, you could hear her last breaths as she succumbed to the smoke and toxic fumes. There's no doubt she would have survived the fire had there been an automatic sprinkler system properly installed in the apartments. The initial fire would have been extinguished in the apartment where it started. Let's not let this happen here in our community. The International Code Council is a family of codes. Part of those codes are the Building Code and Fire Code. Not only are they recognized nationally, but internationally, and they are adopted at those local levels, just as you are proposing to adopt here. Why should we be looking at it now as than before? Things are changing in the construction industry. We're looking at lightweight construction that fails quicker. It's engineered wood products. They're being used in floors and roofs. This impacts the firefighter safety as well as the occupants of the building. Home furnishings, back years and years ago, were made out of leather, wood, and cotton. Today we're looking at synthetic materials, upholstered, stuffed with combustible polyurethane foam that burns quicker and produces more toxic fumes. One other big issue is those fires are being fought by our firefighters. Cancer rate in firefighters, the International Association of Firefighters, indicates that 61% of line of duty deaths between 2002 and 2006 were caused by occupational cancer. That was 1,050 firefighters that lost their lives to occupational cancer. This can be sprinklers can be a cost savings to the city, not only as far as the health benefits and health claims, but obviously with a reduction in the death and cancer rate of firefighters here in the city. The risk of dying in home fire settings decreases by about 80% if sprinklers are in place. Sprinklers also reduce the direct property damage of about 70%. Water usage is another issue. Sprinklers use approximately 10 times less water than the fire department. Again, potential savings for the city. Sprinklers activate by temperature rise and will activate in the room of fire origin, and 85% of the time that one sprinkler head will extinguish the fire. Insurance companies also offer discounts and premiums for structures that are covered by fire sprinklers. Just think how safer our community would be if this had been approved and adopted 5 years ago. So let's not be saying 5 years from now, let's look at adopting sprinkler requirements for these types of structures. I guess I can sum it up and say that no doubt sprinklers save lives. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Cole.
Thank
Any
you.
questions of council? Thank you. Item 10, consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
Any further discussion on consent agenda? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Item 11, bills introduced 2017-37.
An ordinance approving the St. Mary's Hospital Tax Increment Financing Plan, designating a redevelopment area, declaring the proposed redevelopment area a blighted area, and designating F&F Development LLC as the developer of the redevelopment project.
Mr. Molman?
Thank you, Mayor. If it pleases the council, staff will cover bills 2017-37, 38, 39, and 40 as one item. what I'd like to do is introduce to the council our Special Redevelopment Council, Mr. Jeremy Cover with Lauber Municipal Law, along with Mr. Tom Calico of Springstead. Springstead is our municipal financial advisor on this matter. The city has hired these two companies to look into the proposed development at the old St. Mary's site and provide information to the city council along with the TIF commission previously, and to first determine whether or not the statutory requirements for both the TIF and the community improvement district have been met, and also to give their professional opinions as to the appropriateness and viability of the project themselves. So with that, I'd like to, I guess, start with Mr. Cover of Lauber Municipal Law.
Thank you.
He's going to hang out. That's right.
I'm pinch hitting on a couple.
That's right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Jeremy Cope with Lauber Municipal Law. As Mr. Mullen pointed out, we're here tonight to talk about the St. Mary's TIF project. For those of you that came to either one of the two TIF Commission hearings that we had, you obviously got some information on that, but we are going to go through some of that again tonight, especially the developer's going to go into a little more detail for anyone that was not, didn't have the opportunity to be at the TIF Commission hearings. Okay, so just to make sure we're all on the same page here, this is the St. Mary's Hospital TIF plan. The developer is F&F Development LLC. The redevelopment area is approximately 9.8 acres at the former St. Mary's Hospital complex. What's different about this project than some other TIF projects is essentially we have two projects within one, and you're going to have one or the other. So either the Lincoln project or the commercial project, and we're going to go through the differences between the two, but spoiler alert, the Lincoln involves Lincoln University and the commercial project does not. So for the two different projects, the Lincoln project, the total project costs are $44.6 million. For the commercial project, it'd be $30.9 million. Of that, the developer's portion for the Lincoln would be $37.3 million, which is 83.6%. And for the commercial would be $24.2 million, which is 78.3%. The requested public financing portion, so this is the cumulative amount from all the different revenue sources that can go towards this project. For the Lincoln would be $7.3 million or 16.4%. For the commercial project would be $6.7 million, which is 21.7%, all well below the thresholds that the City Council has set in their economic development policies. The projected completion date currently is 2020, but that is subject to change depending on which project is actually selected. Well, this isn't good. Oh, there we go. Okay. Perfect. Okay. So this is a comparison of the two projects. For the Lincoln project, again, as you expect, there's a Lincoln University component that the developer's going to go into in greater detail. That is the most significant difference. If you get down to the bottom, the retail and restaurant buildings, there's 4 for the Lincoln project, 6 for the commercial. That's because some of that space would be used for Lincoln University. And likewise, there's less square footage for retail and restaurant space on the Lincoln project because more of that space is being devoted to Lincoln. This is a sources and uses summary for the Lincoln project. If you read through the sources of funds, equity, that is money that is coming from the developer directly. Debt, that is money that they would be taking out. New market tax credits, federal and state historic tax credits, and brownfield credits are additional credits that they'll be going out and getting on their own, independent from any sort of city approvals. The net present value NPV of the TIF, that's the amount of money that's expected to come in as through the TIF project through what's called the special allocation fund. So that's the funds that come in above and beyond what would have already been there. Now in this case, this is again a little bit different in you don't have there wasn't an existing retail development, and because the hospital was tax exempt, there was no tax revenue coming from that site. So everything that's there would be new above the base. Next is a city supplemental TIF. That's additional incentives beyond the regular statutory TIF that they're requesting in order to make this project work. This project, essentially, because of the state of the buildings, while everyone, I think, shares the concern and the goal of saving those buildings, there's a lot of issues there, and because of that, some of those costs, where it may be cheaper to just knock them down, in order to not do that, some of those costs can't be avoided. And then the most significant difference between the Lincoln project and the commercial project in terms of sources and uses is some sort of contribution estimated to be $10 million from either Lincoln University or the state of Missouri in order to help cover those costs in order to provide the facilities they're looking to build there. So that's the most significant difference between the Lincoln project and the commercial project. And as the developer will go into a little more detail, the reason they're doing these two projects together is because obviously there's a lot of questions, and that's certainly nobody knows how that is going to go. And so rather than going through this entire process for a project that may or may not happen, by doing essentially the parallel approach and doing two projects at the same time, and that way we went through all this once, and if the Lincoln project, which is their preferred project, doesn't come to fruition, then they've already done the legwork to do the commercial project. So on the sources of uses for the commercial project, as you can see, it's generally the same with the exception of the Lincoln contribution, which is clearly absent. For the economic impact of the Lincoln project, I'm going to let Tom go through these next two slides.
So these slides come directly from the plan. What they're designed to show is the benefit to the various taxing entities resulting from the construction of the project, or in this case the two alternative projects. It's important to recognize that this is a benefits analysis. It is not a cost benefits analysis, so this just shows the benefit, the tax benefit to the various taxing entities. Doesn't take into account any spin-off benefits, spending from visitors outside of the district, that kind of thing. Strictly just taxes generated. The other thing to recognize is that the way that it was prepared by the applicant in the plan is a 30-year analysis. And remember, the TIF is 23 years. So what this shows is the 23 years in which the taxes are being paid and then redirected to pay the reimbursable project costs, and then 7 years beyond that when the taxes are no longer being redirected. So the various taxing entities would receive the full amount. So that makes the number larger. It's important to recognize that. So you can see the first slide is for the Lincoln project. Down at the bottom, you get the total. So the net present value benefit is about $8.7 million. And then in the table, you'll see the benefit to each of the respective taxing entities. This is the same format, this time for the commercial project. Everything I said about the prior slide applies here. Only in this case, the net present value benefit is about $11.3 million.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, one of the main points that we go through with the TIF Commission is the required findings that have to be met in order to approve a TIF project. And this is gone in through more detail when we go through the TIF Commission process, because essentially the point of the TIF Commission is to vet this. It's the Jefferson City TIF Commission. The point is to vet this project for the City Council. So of the first required findings, one of them is that the redevelopment area is a blighted area. Included in your packet is a blight analysis that was commissioned by an independent consultant to go through and look at the statutory definitions for blight and make sure that the property at issue does meet the required findings for blight based on the statute. And if you want to read through that lengthy report, you'll find that it was concluded that in fact it does meet the statutory requirements for blight. The second, the redevelopment plan conforms to the comprehensive plan for the development of the city as a whole. This was vetted at the city level, and we've confirmed as expected that this plan does conform with the city's comprehensive plan. Number 3, the estimated dates are not more than 23 years from the adoption of the ordinance approving a redevelopment project. So the longest amount of time that TIF capture can last is 23 years. That's based on statute. In this case, there's actually only one project. With some TIF projects, you'll have multiple projects within the greater project, and you can delay activating TIF on those projects, and so you can actually, up to another 10 years from the initial approval, you can extend that out. In this, with this project, the developer has put it all into one TIF project. So there will be one TIF activation at some point, and that one TIF activation will only last for 23 years. There's not going to be a number of other TIF projects activated later on that would stretch it out. So this one definitely meets the required findings. There we go. Oops. Okay, she's going to get me there. Okay, for the second set of findings, a plan has been developed for relocation assistance for businesses and residents. This is a statutory requirement regardless of the fact that there are no businesses or residences there. With that in mind, the TIF plan does include such a plan. In case somebody happens to crop up, while they're doing this project, they've got a plan for it. A cost-benefit analysis showing the economic impact of the plan on each taxing district has been prepared and includes a fiscal impact study on every affected political subdivision. That is also included in the plan as required by the statute. This is especially important at the TIF commission level because you've got not only the city members there, but also the county members, the school board members, as well as all the other taxing jurisdictions. So that is very important information for them as they're going through this process to see what the impact is going to have on their respective taxing jurisdictions. And finally, the TIF plan does not include the initial development or development of any gambling establishment. That isn't included here, so that meets that requirement. Any questions on the TIF plan generally before I move into a few other slides? And I would point out that in this case, the ordinance to approve the TIF plan only requires a simple majority because it did receive a unanimous vote at the TIF commission level. So because of that, there's not any sort of extra process or supermajority required. Again, because it was unanimous at the TIF commission. Of the other bills that are in that Mr. Mullen referenced, the next one is the TIF contract. So the TIF contract is the agreement between the city and the developer for implementation of the TIF plan. It's somewhere around 16 pages. I'm not going to go through all of it, but just a couple of highlights. One, it confirms the limits on the reimbursable project costs that I referenced previously. So that caps those out both on a dollar level and a percentage level, so that even if the project was to come in at less than what they thought, then they wouldn't still be able to get that same reimbursement. So that it's tied so that we know exactly what the maximum amounts are regardless. Another thing I'd point out is that for administrative costs and expenses, the city's entitled to a fixed fee that starts at $10,000 per year and increases at 3% annually up to $15,000 per year. Those funds are paid out of the special allocation fund, so funds that come in from the project. And the point of that is that there are additional costs for the city that go into administering this, tracking this, especially for the finance department, and so the idea is that the city shouldn't be subsidizing that. Those revenues from the project will offset those costs, and we've estimated that based on where the other project the city has done, we think that's a fair amount. Also on your agenda this evening, which is the public hearing we had earlier, was the CID petition. So the CID is a component of the overall project. On that sources and uses page that I was on earlier, one of those included revenue from the CID. It's contemplated that the CID, once it's formed and the board of directors is approved, would impose a 1% sales tax within that area. So that is again just one component of the overall project. CID is, as Mr. Mullen pointed out, a special taxing district. It is a political subdivision, and because of that, there are certain requirements reporting requirements that go along with that, and those will be taken care of by the CID, not the city. The St. Mary's CID Board of Directors will again impose a 1% tax. 50% of that revenue will be captured by the TIF, because again, this is all new revenue. So 50% will be captured by the TIF and go into the special allocation fund. The other 50% goes to the CID to be used on other CID eligible expenses. So essentially, all of the money from the 1% goes back into the project, but half of it goes through the TIF for those certain eligible expenses. The other half goes back to the CID. There are things within that are not going to be in the TIF plan that are going to be used for the operation of the property, and those funds can go towards that. And then last is the CID cooperative agreement. So the cooperative agreement is an agreement between the city and the CID Board of Directors, because again, they're the governing body of the CID, and essentially that's what governs the relationship between them, including the 50-50 share of the revenues from that we just talked about. One important part of that is that the cooperative agreement does require that of the 5 members of the Board of Directors, one of them is at all times to be a designee of the city, and that way, even though it is a board that is controlled by the property owner as required by statute, by having that one designee of the city, it ensures that the city always has a voice and is always aware of what's going on with the board of directors. Any questions on any of that before I turn it over to Mr. Calico? Okay, thank you.
Well, as was mentioned in our introduction, Springstead was engaged by the city to do various analysis associated with this TIF. One of them was what's called the but-for determination. You might recall when Jeremy mentioned the various findings that you had to make, one of the findings is that the project would not happen but for the assistance. And so our job was to take an independent look at that. Springstead is an independent municipal advisory firm. We don't work for private developers. We only work for local governments. We don't have a financial interest in this project beyond the fee that we were paid to do the analysis. So as I mentioned, this is in compliance with Missouri statute, the TIF Act, and our job is to answer the question, can the project generate a reasonable profit without the requested incentive within the current marketplace and current time. I know when you get into these types of considerations, we tend to really focus on the incentive and the scenario where the project is being built with the incentive. For just a moment, I'm going to ask you to kind of do a little bit of a shift and really focus on the project without an incentive, because our entire analysis is focused solely on the project without an incentive. So you need to just be thinking at it from that standpoint. An important point I need to make at the outset is these are estimates, right? This is a future event. No one knows exactly how it will go, but we try to be as reasonable as we can, but these are estimates from which the actual results will vary to some degree. Our approach to doing this type of analysis is relatively simple. The first thing we do is we ask the developer to provide us a pro forma. In this case, we had 2. And we go through those pro formas. We look at the assumptions regarding costs, regarding revenues, and we do an initial test for reasonableness. We then make whatever adjustments we think are necessary, and then we project an internal rate of return. The internal rate of return is kind of the gold standard in the real estate development business by which you judge a project's feasibility. We then compare that internal rate of return, or IRR, to similar projects in the marketplace. So, without an incentive, is it reaching the level of internal rate of return that other investors would demand for similar projects? And then we'll also do a sensitivity analysis and do some what-ifs. What if project costs came in a little less than what's projected? What if revenues came in a little more? So as I said, our first action is to go through the developer's pro formas for looking at reasonableness. In this case, we don't have any modifications that we suggested. We do note in our report that when we looked at the building construction costs, which are a very large percentage of the total cost of the project, we did see some variance. In some cases we thought some costs were high. In other cases that we thought the projections were low. If we took the most conservative approach and said, okay, we're going to ignore those costs that we thought might be a bit low, if we focus just on the projects that we thought, the costs that we thought were high, and adjusted solely for those, it would bring down the cost of the Lincoln project by 8% and the commercial project by 2%. Neither of those are a big swing, and so you'll see that we've really just chosen to address that in the sensitivity analysis that I'll do towards the end of my presentation. So the return without assistance, again without assistance, for the Lincoln project is a 3.61% internal rate of return, based on our projections looking at the developer's pro forma. For the commercial project, it's 3.56%. All right, so how does that compare? For purposes of comparison, we use the Corpaz Price Waterhouse Cooper Real Estate Investor Survey. It's a mouthful. And we looked at the survey back in the first quarter of 2017 when we first did this work preparing for the TIF Commission. That survey said that for projects like this, the market range demand of investors looking to do similar projects, the return would vary between 6% and 13% for both the Lincoln and the commercial project. I've already said that our projection based on the pro forma without assistance is 3.61 and 3.56, so obviously not within that range. The average is 8.91%, and I mentioned the average because you'll see that that's the benchmark that we now use when we start testing sensitivity to see if what's the likelihood that the project could hit a market range of return with some changes to both costs and revenues. So let's look at costs. Without an incentive for the commercial project, the developer is going to put in $30.9 million. For the Lincoln project, it's $44.6 million. So what if they saw some reductions in cost? What if things came in a little bit better than what they projected? Well, how much would it take in terms of reduced costs to hit that 8.91% average return that we said that we got from the investor survey? Well, for the Lincoln project, it would be 21%. For the commercial project, it's 26%. We don't see those types of reductions to be very likely. Turning to the revenue side of the ledger, the developer is going to see income from leases. They vary a little bit based on the type of project. Obviously, we only have the higher education lease in the Lincoln project, but the office, the developer is projecting $13 to $15 per square foot leases. For the pad buildings, $20 to $25, and for the higher education, $350. We've looked at that. We think those are reasonable based on the current market, but again, testing the sensitivity, how much would they have to see an increased revenue to hit that market rate of return? For the Lincoln project, it's a 45% increase. For the commercial project, it's 46%. Again, that's a variance that we don't consider likely. Just putting it together then, what would they have to see in terms of a combination of cost reductions and revenue increases? It's 14% for Lincoln and 17% for commercial. So our conclusion, based on our analysis, the Blight study that was prepared by Valbridge and an affidavit signed by the applicant, is that the project would not likely happen without assistance within the current market. Be happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you. Any questions of council?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, welcome. At this point, we will invite Mr. Kingsbury to speak. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for having us here tonight, and it's been a long road that's led us here. A lot of teamwork and collaboration. I'm going to turn it over to Cord Maxwell to run through our plan. I'm Rob Kingsbury with F&F Development, and we just look forward to answering any questions you all might have after we run through our plan. Thanks.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thanks again, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Cord Maxwell with the Pulcinelli firm, appearing today on behalf of F&F Development. And first want to state that the staff has done an excellent job helping us get to this point. As many know, we have been working on this for a very long time, and we have appreciated a good collaboration with the staff in working through all of these points in the TIF Commission and the school districts and others. And so it is with a great sense of pride that we come here today with the unanimous recommendation of the TIF Commission before this commission and the recommendation of staff. And we think we do that not because of the great project, which we do believe it is a great project, but just how critical this asset is to this community. Being an outsider, I have heard about it time and time again, and I know Rob and the rest of the development team feel a huge sense of responsibility for this critical asset in your downtown core that has such a connection to so many in this community. As all know, this was the former site of the St. Mary's Hospital, and that hospital was originally constructed on the site in 1905. It then has had multiple additions over the years, and as I've said at this podium many times, it's easy to see that by the vast array of architectural styles that you see in this. It had renovations done in the 30s, the 60s, the 80s, the 90s, and 2000. That last renovation in 2000, though, being 15 years on and time moving on, it truly became clear that the building was functionally obsolete and that St. Mary's needed to move on to a bright new future at their new location. And since that time, the Farmer family has been working hard through F&F Development to bring forward a redevelopment plan that all of this community can be proud of. And we do think this is a great site. It's great real estate in a great city, but it has a lot of challenges. It has the historic preservation elements that need to be looked at, given that we have over a 100-year structure. We have significant demolition and substantial environmental remediation that has to happen with this property. And at the end of the day, we believe that a development can occur here and a redevelopment can occur that all can be proud of, but unfortunately this incentive that we're talking about and that we're speaking of and asking the council for, and that we're also asking Missouri state government for and others to participate in, all of this is necessary because we believe to have a successful redevelopment of this site, we have to offer very attractive economics to end users. While we believe it's a great site, while it's a core component of your downtown community, to be able to have users come to this site and populate it, we think we have to give a very, very, very substantial economic benefit to make that happen. And that's why we asked the TIF Commission, and we asked this council, and we're asking state government, and we're asking the federal government and anybody else to come and partner with us as developers to be able to put this investment in to make this property happen. And we believe with the vote of this council, we'll be able to move that forward. So the project cannot move forward without this requested incentive. And we really believe this is the first domino that needs to fall. As we have talked about, and I show on this scope and the staff's presentation showed of our capital stack, we are asking all levels to participate in this. The Farmer family, F&F Development, is putting in substantial private debt and equity. But beyond that, we need the TIF, the CID, we're asking the state for historic tax credits, we're asking for brownfield tax credits. We're looking at a state grant for the Lincoln project to happen. We're asking the federal government to support this project through historic tax credits and new market tax credits. All of these things have to come together to be able to execute this plan. And we feel very confident those things can come together, but the key component of that is working with the city mayor to be able to get this TIF and this CID in place so we can run that process and get it done. One of the good things that we have seen, and we knew as we put this together, and the staff agreed, and your outside consultants agreed, as you just heard from Mr. Calico, is that we passed the but-for test. This project cannot happen without these public incentives. We'll go through the numbers a little bit more later, but it is the key component of this vote by this council to be able to move this forward, and we would ask for that. But for that investment that you'd make in this project, we think you check off many, many goals of the city. We create a economically productive asset that is currently underutilized. A long-term asset, something that will be in this community for decades and decades and will ultimately produce significant tax revenues for all of the taxing jurisdictions, the city, the county, and beyond. And the spin-off economic benefits that will come to the rest of downtown and the Capitol complex and beyond, we think are significant. Having that increased commerce, synergies with your other assets in your downtown area, and an increased employment profile. So we would ask this council to consider all of those things as they make their vote. This chart very much mirrors what the staff showed you, but as all said, this is slightly different than most TIF projects. Most TIF projects, when you bring them forward, there is one clear course. We're going to do this project. Unfortunately, in this case, that's not possible because, as I've said here at this podium during the TIF Commission and said before, we don't control 100% our destiny. We are asking you for the next step to be able to move this forward, but with one of the projects, the Lincoln project, which is the preferred project of the developer, beyond the actions that are necessary by the council, beyond the actions that are necessary by the developer, there is a huge sort of bogey in the pro forma that a very significant grant would be necessary from the state of Missouri. And while we will work on that and continue to work on that, I think as many have seen, that could be tough under some current things that are going on in the state right now, and so all of us have to be aware of that, acknowledge that, understand that, and so we thought it was only prudent when we started this process almost a year ago that we would be ready and propose for two different projects. So again, our favored project, the project that we would like to do because we think it is the best for this community and the best for our site, is the Lincoln project. But given that that is in part out of our hands, we also proposed the commercial project. Now, the significant difference of the projects is the Lincoln project includes the redevelopment of the existing building, and it's really this middle building. Having a little trouble with the mouse, but I think everybody can see the large piece in the middle that says Lincoln. Would be the redevelopment of that 135,000 square foot building in the center to be a satellite campus for Lincoln University. The other components of the project are the historic redevelopment of the original St. Mary's Hospital for office and commercial at approximately 75,000 square feet, the refurbishing of the current medical office building at about 37,000 square feet, and then we would have 4 pads under this plan that could be used for restaurant and service retail of approximately 21,000 square feet. This project is just shy of $45 million, and as I said before, this is our preferred plan. The reason is we think it brings a very unique feature to the Capitol and downtown area. It brings an influx of students. It drives our office and commercial area. It would drive our retail area, and it becomes a true mixed-use project in the heart of the city. We believe that's an undeniably good thing. But as I've said, despite all of our wishes, nobody in this room controls the fate of alone can that project happen. And so because of that, we have also proposed our commercial project. It is essentially the same plan. You still have the 75,000 square foot redevelopment of the St. Mary's Hospital building, the 37,000 square foot medical office building, but instead of the Lincoln University site in the middle, that is surgically demolished and dropped, and instead of 4 pads, we now have 6 commercial pads. Our cost, because we do not have that expensive renovation and environmental remediation of that 135,000 square foot building, they move down a little bit. It's only about $31 million for this project. We still think this is an excellent project and something this community can be proud of and the developer can be proud of, and creates a significant and vital redevelopment in the center of your city and something we can all be proud of. It's just that I think if all of us had our choice, we would pick the Lincoln project first. And so what do the numbers look like? This is sort of echoing a lot of the things that you saw in your staff report. I would say, because I said this at the TIF Commission and some people asked questions about it, these numbers are slightly different than what Mr. Calico presented, and I actually think that's a good thing. The reason is we look at it one way and created our numbers, and they independently go and study and review the numbers themselves. So the numbers are slightly different between the developer's calculations and Springstead's calculations, but the themes are all generally the exact same. And that theme is we're asking for approximately $7.3 million of reimbursable costs on the Lincoln project on a $44.6 million project, i.e. 16.48% of the cost. And on the commercial project, we're asking for 6.6 on a $30 million or 21% of the cost. Now, as all of us know, and as the staff did an excellent job of presenting, the question that is before this council is, but for this development, but for this incentive, could we end up building it? Could we end up doing it? And because of that, is it then fair to grant these public dollars to the project? And we believe absolutely 100% we hit that but-for test. The reason is we calculate that the return without these incentives are either negative or incalculable. That's, again, slightly different than what the staff looked at, but the difference really, and Mr. Calico can correct me, is that they looked at all of the other incentives come into place but for the TIF and the CID, and we were saying if you don't get the TIF or the CID, you don't have a project and you don't get the rest of them. So that's why ours were incalculable. Either way, the but-for test is passed. The staff looked at about a 3% return in either of the scenarios. We're saying an incalculable or a negative. Anybody that's involved in finance and understands or has gotten their own home mortgage lately would know that you're looking at mortgage rates of something around 3 to 4 to 5%. Well, if it's 3 to 4 to 5% that you're paying interest to a bank and you're only returning 3%, you're negative. You can't pay your debt. You can't pay the bank. And if you can't pay the bank, you don't have a project. So in any of these scenarios, whether it's a true negative return on our side or the 3% that was shown by staff, we cannot pass the but-for test. These projects will not get built without TIF or CID. So we believe, and your staff has agreed and your TIF commission has agreed, that we have passed the but-for test and would ask this council's support. We also believe that given these levels of return that we're showing, based on all of the estimates, we are well within the request of reasonable to this commission and would ask that this be moved forward. With that, Madam Mayor, I would just close our presentation and highlight some of the benefits of the request that we have put in front of you. First, all of the revenue streams that we are requesting is on a pay-as-you-go basis. We are not requesting any form of credit support or lending from the city. All of the lending in this project will be done on a private basis. We will put in private equity. We will go to the bank and get a private loan. We will take all of the development risk in this project on our own. All that we ask is that these revenue streams be granted and allow us to be able to pay a portion of that lending and that equity back from these public revenues. We think that is a very, very strong component. We made this point a lot at the TIF Commission and at special meetings we had with the school board. As all know in this community, we passed a bond issuance just recently during the time our TIF was going through the process. And we could have gone and looked at changing what our request is. We were only showing that we're making about an 8% return, and I would say to you that an 8% return on a project this difficult this complex with this much development risk, it could stand to have a higher incentive request. But in talking it over with the staff, and most importantly, talking it over with F&F Development, we didn't think that would be appropriate. What we did was we held all of our numbers the exact same, and given that higher mill levy rate of the school district, what it actually does is it will pay off the TIF faster. So all of the revenues will be returned to the taxing jurisdictions quicker. We're projecting that this TIF should pay off in approximately 19 years now because of that. Uncaptured sales tax. Even though we're approving a TIF and we're actually asking the state as well for a supplemental portion of your sales tax, there still is uncaptured portions of sales tax that will be delivered both to the state, the county, and the city. 0.25% on the Lincoln plan, 0.5% on the commercial plan. Another component that we looked at and we think could be very significant in this, there is no personal property tax captured in this TIF. We are looking at a plan that will have significant restaurants, significant office uses. All of those things have personal property taxes associated with them. Those will flow to the taxing jurisdictions and not be captured by the developer. We think that gives an immediate shot in the arm for all of the taxing jurisdictions, even while this TIF is running. And maybe the largest piece for the council to consider and think about, and the numbers get there slightly differently in each one. In Lincoln, we're a little bit lower on the sales tax, higher on the property tax. In the commercial project, we're higher on the sales tax and lower on the property tax, but the numbers end up roughly the same. $1.6 million. In 19 years, when this project is over and closed, we see $1.6 million of taxes coming in annually to all of the taxing jurisdictions out there. We understand that's a long time from now, but we're looking at a core asset. We're looking at something that will be at the very heart of your community for not 10 years, not 15 years, not 20 years, but decades and decades and decades. And we're going to restore it to an appropriate place and glory that will be able to create a long-term asset. We went through this substantially in our presentation, but either of these uses gives a very big shot in the arm. The real estate market is in its 9th year of expansion right now. There are tenants that are out there. There are folks that are interested in this site. You have a quality local developer that can get to these tenants and can bring them in and have them. We would ask that the council move this forward because we believe the time is now. With that, Madam Mayor, we would be happy to stand for any questions that the council may have now or at the end of all of these presentations. But we would ask for your support. We think this is a great project and we would love to move it forward with the approval of this council.
Thank you, Mr. Maxwell, for those comments, and it's very exciting potential redevelopment project for our city, and it's good to see that you have two options that sets it up for a greater chance of success, having those options. And you touched on it briefly too, but I know one comment I probably heard more over the years than anything is what is going to be done with the St. Mary's site. It's truly one of those very unique and special places in the community and the hearts of many people here that have either an emotional tie to it, just with their families, or for whatever reason. It's definitely holds a special place in the community, and so it's good to see something happening, because the longer it sits vacant, the more it would dilapidate and get into worse conditions. So the fact that we have a developer with a good, solid plan, and the fact that it's gone through the TIF commission with success in that vote as well is definitely very positive for the community too. So thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Mayor.
And we have first read number 37, Bill 37. Is there any council comments or discussion or questions at this time? Councilman Henry?
Sorry, Councilman.
First off, thanks for being here with us this evening. My first question is there a timetable on when you'll know anything as far as the Lincoln project goes, in figuring out which projects you guys are going to go with?
So it's a great question, Councilman, and I should have given it the answer to that at the very beginning. So Lincoln has been a great partner in this project. We have sat down and talked with them many, many times with the senior staff of Lincoln. And as we know earlier, that senior staff has turned over a little bit here recently, and we look forward to meeting with the new president shortly. But our plan is we would ask for the support of this council, and then we believe that we owe it then to our partner who has been with us here since the very beginning to sit down with them and have a very real, very serious discussion about are all ready to try to take this to the next step and move this on to the legislature. It is our belief and probably statement that there's not just an extra $10 million sitting around in Lincoln's budget tomorrow to be able to make this project work, that we would need to go to the legislature together. But we also understand that Lincoln has a lot of different priorities, or many priorities out there, and that the current status of state funding and the current support for higher education might not be as strong as it once was in some elements. And so we really need to ask Lincoln, do they want to have that, do they want to run that race with us? And so our thought would be that after we know that this component is there, we sit down, we have those discussions, and we figure out between both of us the next steps on that, and then sort of to the next point we would come back obviously and bring all of that information to city representatives as well, and be able to then make a choice of the way to move this forward. So I don't know if that directly answers for a timeline, but what we would say is we want to get going faster than anybody on this, and so with your support and with the support of this council in August, we would be having those discussions as soon as September to be able to decide this course and bring it back for all.
I always say that, there's always a gamble involved. Ultimately, there's never a prediction or we never believe that this how successful is going to be until see what success is all. But what kind of confidence, I guess, we can give to the public and let the public know that this will and this can be a successful project?
Yeah. I think, Councilman, the first place that I would start with that is having a local developer that is highly, highly invested in this community. That is probably the single biggest component of this. Folks that have their offices right next door, that see it every day, that understand the connection that the community has. I think that's probably one of the biggest points about this. I said this in front of the TIF Commission, and I said it slightly earlier, but I'll expound on it. I don't know a lot of other developers that would go and look to take on a project this complicated with this many uses that needs this many incentives to go and generate an 8% return. But you have a developer with a strong local connection that is well capitalized, that wants to take this on. It's almost a passion project, and I think that at the end of the day is the thing that tells me undoubtedly through thick and thin we will find success on this. But beyond that, I also think that there will be substantial success because this is a great piece of real estate. It's a fantastic, phenomenally located piece of real estate in a great community. It's just got some warts, some blight to it, some things that need to be cleaned up, and those things that need to be cleaned up are very, very expensive. But once we do those things, I think this is going to be really a rock star project. So I think the two fundamentals that are driving this are really local developer, great location, sort of fundamental real estate economics behind it, And then lastly would really be the support of this community with a TIF and a CID, but also being at the heart of Missouri state government. You saw many of the other requests that we have in there involve state government. I think that that sets us up in a very good way. And I know sometimes Jefferson City hasn't always gotten its due when it came to the legislature and otherwise, but we feel very confident that the stars are aligning for this to be a very, very successful project that everybody on this council can be supportive of and excited about, not just when votes are taken in August of 2017, but over the years as the redevelopment happens and the vitality is brought back to the downtown area. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further council questions, comments, discussion? Councilman Hussey?
I've got one on, you refer to the pad sites, retail/restaurant or something like that, and could you clarify, I guess, what, as developers, you have in mind for those particular sites?
Thank you, Councilman. So there's been many comments that have been made at the TIF Commission, some or earlier from here about the death of retail, right? Retail's no longer going to exist. It's brick and mortar is just gone, and it's all going to go on the internet. And why I don't think we have quite the sky is falling view that some have about the status of retail in the world. We do recognize that what has happened over the last 24 to 36 months in retail may be even more significant than what happened during the Great Recession. What is going on right now with the pace and change in the retail environment is truly stunning. But what we have found and what you're still seeing is that those components that I said before, great, solid, fundamental real estate, it's still working. And there's still a desire and there's still a need. And that's what we think we have here, particularly then when you focus on the right type of retail. This will not be most likely trying to sell shoes or soft goods or things like that, against the internet. What this would much more be doing is looking at casual dining, entertainment experiences, coffee, those types of uses that the internet can't provide to you, and that you look at instead as something that would fit in incredibly well in your downtown and Capitol Complex area. And so that's not a perfect answer, as we don't have tenants signed up today. But Rob goes to the conventions and works it as hard as anyone I've seen, and we definitely have the options for many users out there that would like to be at this site, and we really see that probably with more of a restaurant focus that would be down here.
And then to follow up, and I expressed this to Mr. Kingsbury before as well, about parking at the site. I know there's a tear down of one of the parking structures. One of them remains. If you look at the commercial plan, there's still a lot of parking, and so I guess I would just encourage developers, if the plan goes forward, to not build more parking that's necessary. If you haven't heard, we kind of have a stormwater problem in this town, and seas of concrete create excess runoff and those sorts of things. And so I think of this kind of being a unique opportunity to take a site right now that probably produces a lot of runoff and try to find ways to mitigate that. And so I would, shoot back to say that, since it's kind of got that urban feel and that portion of the community, I'm one of those that hates to see parking lots built for Black Friday.
Yep.
When you build something for the one day of the year that you fill it. And so I would just encourage the developer to be creative about opportunities to generate more revenue out of that property and turn parking spots that never get used into something that's more reasonable for that site, or either a greater return for the developer or something that's not impervious surface that's just running off into the system. So
Understood, Councilman. It's an issue everywhere, and I understand it's very much an issue when you have a very large river next to you. So we understand that, and we'll take all of that into consideration with the plans.
Further questions, comments from council? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So we first read bills introduced number 37. At this time, we will do Bill 2017-38.
An ordinance approving a tax increment financing contract between the City of Jefferson, Missouri and F&F Development, LLC for the implementation of the St. Mary's Hospital Tax Increment Financing Plan and authorizing the mayor to execute the agreement.
Mr. Molman?
All comments on this have been covered previously, so if there's any particular
Nothing
questions
additional?
on this,
Okay.
either myself or Jeremy or Tom or sure the developer, we'd be happy to field them, but we don't have anything additional on this.
Okay, and we'll go through and read all four, even though they've sort of been covered, but if there's anything additional that anybody wants to add specifically, let us know. And same with council, if there's any questions specifically. Councilman Mahalovich?
I just got one question about the CID. There's been some press with regard to the management of that and the accountability of the funds because it is a separate taxing district. I did learn something I didn't know. We will sit on that commission, or somebody from city will sit on that. How's that managed, and how are we assured that the CID is managed as it should be?
Right. The cooperative agreement for the CID contemplates that the city would have the ability to name one member to the 5-member board of directors. And so what this current plan contemplates is that our finance director, Ms. Mueller, would be appointed to that board and sit on there. So as a board member, she would be privy to all documents and information of the SID. So if there's ever a situation where we were concerned that management of the SID isn't going the way that it should be, we would have a voice on the board to affect change, and then also be privy to the information that a board member would be privy to. So it's a fairly typical setup that you have where a local government would name someone to that board, so that way they can fulfill that oversight function.
Any further questions, comments? Councilman Graham?
I guess along those same lines, since we're talking about the CID, what other places in Jefferson City have a CID?
The only other CID is at the Capitol Mall.
Okay.
No, I believe the development on East Stonklin, wasn't that also? Yeah, that entire block. I think it was a CID also.
Is that a TIF or a CID?
The old Munichburg is a CID.
And the old Munichburg Association, they have to get the new sidewalks and infrastructure.
And then there's a couple TDDs, like the area in the Coles area, that complex, and then the Eastland Walmart. So similar, very similar. And I did, while you're on that topic, Councilman Graham, because it was mentioned at the podium, a specific business, and typically when comments are made at the podium, they don't necessarily have to be factual. It's when public comments, when they're made. But Pier 1 was mentioned specifically, and Pier 1, just to clarify, is not in a CID or any special taxing district. So just to mention, to clarify when that specific business was named.
And I guess that was my question, trying to make it clarity for those individuals in the audience, as well as those who are listening, where all do we have CIDs in Jefferson City, so that individuals will know exactly what businesses have a CID component tied to it. So,
Mr.
If
Kroll?
I was just going to say, maybe we'll have staff put together a little chart that has identified the TDDs and the TIFs and the CIDs and kind of summarize that for the next meeting.
thank you.
Any further questions, comments? Okay, 2017-39.
An ordinance approving the petition to establish the St. Mary's Hospital Community Improvement District and establishing the St. Mary's Hospital Community Improvement District.
We've already had the public hearing, so I assume nothing more to add on that. Any questions of council? 2017-40.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri authorizing the mayor to enter into a cooperative agreement with the St. Mary's Hospital Community Improvement District for funding and financing of Community Improvement District improvements in relation to the St. Mary's Hospital tax increment financing.
Thank you. Anything further to add? Any further comments, questions? Okay, at this time, I'd like to thank city staff for their work on the TIF, also Mr. Cover, Calico, Maxwell, and Kingsbury for their input this evening. And now we'll move on to 2017-41.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri adopting a budget and personnel classification plan for the city for the period of November 1, 2017 to October 31, 2018, and appropriating money in the city treasury to pay the cost of operating the city government during that period in accordance with the budget.
Mrs. Miller.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The 2017-2018 operating budget's been recommended for approval by the mayor. The proposed general revenue budget is projected to be $32,441,302.38, with additional funding from other funds and for capital projects, bringing the total City of Jefferson budget for fiscal year 2018 to $63,353,702.10.
Thank you. Any questions of council? Comments? 2017-42.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri providing for the levy of city taxes and establishing the rate of taxation for the City of Jefferson, Missouri for the year 2017.
Mrs. Miller.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The proposed 2017-2018 budget's been prepared based on the property tax rate for the general fund at 46 cents and the fireman's retirement rate at .0961, and that is no change from the current year.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Okay, the next bills that we have, 2017-43 through 2017-50, pertain to amending Chapter 13 and Chapter 8. Mr. Burkhardt will give us information about those bills, but in the effort to make it streamlined, we will have Mrs. Powell read all of those bills at this time and then go through Larry's description. Is that agreeable to council? Okay, Mrs. Powell.
2017-43, an ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri, amending the City Code, Chapter 13, Section 13-42 and Section 13-43, by replacing the adoption of the International Fire Code 2009 and amendments to the International Fire Code 2009 by adoption of the International Fire Code 2015. 2017-44, an ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri, amending the City Code, Chapter 8, Section 8-2 and Section 8-3, by replacing the adoption of the National Electrical Code 2011 and amendments to the National Electrical Code 2011 by the adoption of the National Electric Code 2014. 2017-45, an ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri, amending the City Code, Chapter 8, Section 8-4 and Section 8-5 by replacing the adoption of the International Plumbing Code 2009 and amendments to the International Plumbing Code 2009 by adoption of the 2015 International Plumbing Code. 2017-46, an ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri, amending the City Code, Chapter 8, Article 1, Section 8-6, Section 8-7, Section 8-8, and Section 8-9 by inserting, by adoption of the 2015 International Mechanical and Fuel Gas Codes and amendments to the 2015 International Mechanical and Fuel Gas Codes. 2017-47, an ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri, amending the City Code, Chapter 8, Article 2, Section 8-18, Section 8-19, Section 8-21, and Section 8-22 by replacing the adoption of the 2009 International Building and Residential Codes and amendments to the 2009 International Building and Residential Codes by adoption of the 2015 International Building Residential Codes. 2017-48, an ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri, amending the City Code, Chapter 8, Article 2, Section 8-23, and Section 8-24 by inserting the adoption of the 2015 International Existing Building Code and amendments to the 2015 International Existing Building Code. 2017-49, an ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri, amending the City Code, Chapter 8, Article 2, Section 8-25, and Section 8-26 by inserting the adoption of the 2015 International Swimming Pool and Spa Code and amendments to the 2015 International Swimming Pool and Spa Code. 2017-50, an ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri, amending the City Code, Chapter 8, Section 8-49, and Section 8-50 by replacing the adoption of the 2009 International Property Maintenance Code and amendments to the 2009 International Property Maintenance Code by adoption of the 2015 International Property Maintenance Code.
Thank you, Mrs. Powell. And now Mr. Burkhart.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Council, for your patience. This is a long meeting, so there is a 9-page bill summary that was included in your packet, and I'll try to paraphrase it the best I can. There are some highlights. We had a speaker tonight for sprinklers, for and against. But just to summarize, 1 and 2 family homes are recommended to remain exempt from sprinklers per the residential code, which is this book. However, homeowners are required by state statute to offer the option of fire sprinklers within the new home. This is only affecting new construction. Revised Missouri statute has been in effect for quite a while, but it was missed in the code section. Within commercial construction, the building and fire code are recommended to remain unchanged, which would require fire sprinklers in apartments, 3 units and more. In fact, all the residential and the fire code and building code all ask for sprinklers in any type of residential unit. So we are exempting some from that requirement. The current code for Jefferson City for apartments is 11 or more units currently that would require sprinklers. And so even back in 2009, that code was modified. I was asked to mention about the International Energy Conservation Code, which is this book. It was reviewed but not recommended for adoption. The Residential Code Committee, which we have Dan Clint, the chair of that, and also a member of the ad hoc committee present, thought it was a little bit too much regulatory action on that type of conservation within the residential structures. As far as commercial goes, they didn't really see too many objections to this code book. New codes that we're adopting, we currently have 6 of the International Code Council, plus that includes the National Electric Code, but we're adding mechanical and fuel gas, swimming pool and spa code, and also the existing building code. Those fill technical gaps that would be hard to enforce for us on code enforcement. The existing building code, though, was part of the building code. It was Chapter 34, but that was an editor's choice to take that out of that code book. I'm trying to go as fast as I can. I'm sorry. The rest of the bill summary kind of gives you a little bit more history. The basic purpose of building codes is health, safety, and welfare. The City of Jefferson, back in May of 1935, started adopting model codes. It was an insurance code that was adopted. And the last time that the city updated its building codes was back in 2012. We had a little bit of a gap there because I think of personnel change. It is my understanding that they were trying to do it on a 3-year lag basis prior to that. But back in May, when I had a presentation to the council formed a resolution back in December 2015 to form an ad hoc steering committee of the community to review and make recommendations of the newer codes. That committee started meeting in February 2016, so 18 months later, here we are with the recommendation of that committee. And that was of 33 different individuals that were pretty well representing the design and construction industry of Jefferson City. You have in your packet a list of the committee members and which committees they did serve on. I would like to note that Chief Turner was present at most of those meetings with me as assisting the community. We also had technical experts in various areas were invited to share their professional opinions. This included geotechnical, structural engineering, concrete construction, and pool construction. And plus, we did make all information available on the city's website. So after 80-plus meetings, the committee came up with the recommendation of adopting 10 different codes. And part of that was in conjunction with the licensing boards for electrical contractors and plumbing contractors. They did meet and they did approve those codes and any type of amendments that were introduced. Let's see. I also did include about like a page or so on fire sprinklers for the council's review. I think some of the concerns were that fire sprinklers would be retroactive into existing buildings, and that is not the case. It's for new construction. And I did talk to the council basically that with the way the building code is formulated, it's taking into account that fire sprinklers would be introduced into residential units. So residential units are hotel, apartments, single family, and also like group homes. But the earlier codes put a 2-hour fire barrier, for instance, and now we're only requiring 1-hour fire barrier. So if between the units, if that's assuming that sprinklers would be introduced. So the code is trying to take advantage of that by lessening construction requirements and then also trying to take into account life safety. I did include also a rough estimate of a 10-unit multi-story apartment building, about 12,000 square feet. The cost of a sprinkler system of that would be 2.4%. The committee is very much aware of the financial impact that it would have. That's part of the reason why residential sprinklers were not recommended by the committee, because right now Habitat for Humanity, for instance, is putting in sprinklers inside their new builds, and that's averaging about $2 a square foot. In other places of the country, that can be $1 to $1.50 per square foot for a single family. So if you have a 2,000 square foot house, you could add $4,000 to the construction cost of that, which would possibly deter a new home buyer. So it was more of a financial decision. We're looking at that, and for commercial construction, 2.4%. So 2 to 3% additional cost would be put onto the project budget, and that's where the $25 extra rent would be, because someone has to pay that cost off. Fire sprinklers were discussed at length by the committee. There was about like 6 different meetings where we did have public attendance that discussed that. I'm trying to see where else. And the rest of the bill summary includes a letter that was presented to the Fire Code Committee by the Mid-Mo Apartment Association saying that they would like to have the sprinklers requirement stay the same. I did include a cost analysis that was provided by Mr. Thanen, and this shows where his numbers were as far as development of new apartment buildings were not really cost feasible within the city, even with or without sprinklers. So that's part of your packet. We also did get a letter of endorsement by the Home Builders Association, written by Mr. Heath Clarkston, who's president in the audience, endorsing the International Residential Code, existing building code, and International Building Code. I would like to remind the council that the International Building Code and the International Fire Code are the same as far as when it comes to fire protection systems. Their Chapter 9 in the Fire Code is the same as the Building Code. And also Chapter 10 for egress from a building is the same as it in the Fire Code as it is in the Building Code. And so there's a lot of overlap as far as those critical components of a building between the Fire Code and Building Code. And finally, we did receive an endorsement from the News Tribune, and that was scanned in for your packet. So I try to condense it and be really fast, but 18 months and 10 codes later, do you have any questions that currently or that I can try to answer, but staff supports the recommendation by the ad hoc steering committee.
Thank you, Mr. Burkhart. Are there any questions of council? And I would also ask too if Chief Schofield would want to add anything when it comes to the sprinkler piece. So I don't know if we want to do that before or after council questions. Did you have we'll start with Councilman Hussey.
I do, and thank you. I mean, building codes are exciting material to read through, I'm sure. On the sprinkler one, because I think we've all kind of, that's the one that's generated the most attention and quite frankly, the other pieces, I'm not certain I would have the knowledge base to really understand some of those technical changes, but it was at units that were greater than 10 before, and now it would get moved down to 3. So I guess my question is just why 3, or what's the science behind that particular number on a decision like this?
The way the model codes are structured, you have the residential code, which covers 1 and 2 family plus townhomes. And the model code recommends that fire sprinklers are placed in those type of structures. And then it just continues on with the commercial side, which is 3 and above. So it's been noted that fire sprinkler saves lives and also saves property. So they're looking at it that why do you have smoke detectors? You know, this is a life safety feature that you should have within your structure, and it's relatively inexpensive. If you're looking at the cost, they usually look at things at square foot costs. And if you go and Google it, the NFPA will tell you $1 to $7 a square foot. New construction, like 3 units, is $4 a square foot. It's just part of construction, and also just putting in life safety features that should be there to help us save lives.
And I guess I don't want to debate the merits of the sprinklers and not the sprinklers. I was more arriving at just that decision for 3, and it sounds more like our code is sort of set up that 1 and 2 get handled by a particular set, and then 3 and above are handled. So the decision at 3 is really a matter of simplicity's sake within our code, as opposed to that a 3 unit is different than a 10 unit, different than a single family in that instance. And so we've arrived at 3 because that's the way the code's divided. That's what you're telling me?
There's also a lot of support for sprinklers to be introduced into single family and 2 family dwellings.
And then I guess my follow-up on a separate subject is the HBA letter of support, which is great that that's provided. They do express concern about long-term, I guess, staffing and support to enforce this and keep cost equitable. And so with the adoption of this code as our point person within city staff on these types of things, would you share those concerns, or do you envision there being an increased workload or the need for us as a council to give consideration down the road for increased resources to that department?
That topic is being reviewed with the steering committee and also with the city administrator at great length as far as what we should do or shouldn't do. We understand there's limited resources by the city, but part of the resolution was for the steering committee to, besides review the codes, is also to review process. And so what do we want to regulate here in Jefferson City is being scrutinized and trying to understand what type of increased workload it is. As far as what's been recommended here, I'm not saying we could get by totally, but we want to look at that to make sure that we have the skill and expertise to make sure things are constructed properly.
Mr. Kroll has a follow-up comment, and then I know Chief Schofield will address the multifamily aspect, and then we'll have a question from Councilman Mahalovich.
I was just going to ask Mr. Bernhardt if you know this requirement that Columbia has on sprinklers, not that we use them as our standard, but are we would this make us consistent with Columbia's?
It would make us consistent with Columbia. It's they just went through and adopted their codes went into effect last October, and we're mimicking them as far as our outcome here.
So I think that helps a little bit with that number. The other issue on staffing is we know we had the budget meetings, and staffing is certainly a need that's been identified in the plan review component, and then also the inspection component, and that's certainly something that I think maybe later on warrants further discussion.
And Chief Schofield, did you want to address the number of units?
Yeah, I can. When we were discussing this and really what our experience has been in these kind of residential fires and the setting that they occur in is that, neighbors can't necessarily control their neighbors. And so in a multifamily situation, a lot of times what we see is that there can be just one person who, whether it be intentional or accidental, can impact all of their neighbors in a multifamily environment. And so in terms of protecting those people that may or may not be able to protect themselves, we think that we should take full advantage of any engineering controls like sprinklers for those people who might be unaware of what's occurring in the same building or be unprotected. So it just really comes down to us, to that kind of responsibility and how much you can control. We feel like if you're in a single or two-family residential structure, you have a pretty good idea of who those folks are and what their actions are and how they could impact you from a safety standpoint.
Thank you. And Councilman Mahalovich had a question?
Well, maybe it could even be addressed on the budget committee this Thursday, but if we adopt a code that requires a mechanical inspector and we have a position that's not funded, that would put us in a little bit of a dilemma to have ordinances out there that were not capable of enforcement. So I don't know if that's a question for now or Thursday, because we're right in the throes of debating a position that's unfunded. Also, do we have a electrical and we have a plumbing, but we don't have a mechanical examiner group, do we? So it would almost require us to come up with a mechanical examiners board.
I would love to see that, yes, but right now, by just adopting the mechanical code, it fills in gaps that we can try to address, and main things are like ventilation requirements. I can give some examples, such as like beauty shops and nail salons. They're supposed to have 50 cubic feet per minute at each station, and so without having the mechanical code there to go ahead and look at that directly, and by adopting it directly instead of to get into a nuance of the codes, they adopt the mechanical code by reference, but only for that specific section, so it doesn't have ventilation requirements. So it's going to help us as far as any type of code enforcement for, I would say, beauty shops. We had smoking salons, if you want to call the hookah lounge. I mean, we use some ventilation requirements there in restaurants when they put hoods over ranges. That's not really put into the building code. That's all in the mechanical code. And so at least we have some enforcement capabilities, we don't per se have a mechanical or master mechanical individual on staff, but by adopting the code, the mechanical designers can put together plans and specifications that we can follow, and if there's something that varies from that, then we have to go back to the mechanical designer. But that's mainly on commercial projects. But when you get into residential, it gives us a little bit of advantage because that's also in the residential code. So you're giving us more teeth, or if more enforcement capability, because right now with some of the things that we would go and try to ask people to do, that's kind of weak as far as what I would say as far as any type of judicial action or judicial review. That's why, though, by adopting the mechanical code directly will help us tremendously as far as our projects go for mechanical design, because we do hire mechanical engineers indirectly through the developer. So anyways, it's a concern, and I've asked in my budget requests every year for a mechanical inspector, but also recognize that the city has limits as far as resources, and we're going to be looking at that a little closer with the steering committee as far as what they would like to recommend. It's been noted for many years prior to my coming here that mechanical would be very desirable.
Mr. Cole?
Yeah, I would just add that adoption of a code requirement does not necessarily mean that you have to add an inspector to inspect those. There are other ways to go about inspecting those. One, certification from a design professional. You can also contract those plan review pieces out, and in some cases even inspection out. And in some cases there's different ways to go about funding those. So the adoption of the code does not necessarily mean that there has to be an inspection component. It makes some sense though, but not necessarily.
Chief Schofield, did you have anything to add on the sprinkler piece? Any comments?
I would just reinforce or support what the building official stated, that these codes are interwoven, and that the decision to not adopt the fire code would potentially put a lot of this work, I think, in question, because we would have to go back and address how those disconnects may be introduced into our code system. And so he mentioned fire separation and how that was a trade-off, because it was assumed that we had fire sprinklers already as part of the total package document. So those kind of things would require an additional look from us for us to feel any kind of comfort level in moving forward with the rest of the remaining code or the existing fire code.
Thank you. Councilman Hussey?
Just a question again on the sprinkler piece, because there was a comment made by a previous speaker that talked about lack of new construction for these kinds of things. But if I'm reading this correct, right, that sprinkler requirement would apply to if somebody took a current single-family house and was then to subdivide it into a multifamily unit, it was permitted by zoning and those sorts of things. That's considered a new multifamily building permit, and so therefore you get my point, that it wouldn't necessarily have to construct an entire new complex. It could be a renovation of an existing building, correct?
Correct.
And then if somebody were down that same path, right now it's 11 or more. If I had a 6-unit building and I was somehow reconfiguring to make that now a 7-unit building, do I fall under now I've got to sprinkler my facility, or?
Well, maybe. It's and
I'm not trying to find loopholes for people to get out of sprinklers. I just think it's important for clarity for the public to understand, and all of us. Existing buildings are unique.
Okay. And so what you described is change of use within an existing building, especially if you go from single family to multiple apartments. So that's where the existing building code actually gives you a few options. And for instance, we use the existing building performance requirements for the Mill Bottom Event Center. That was a change of use. You also have the Windstone. That's over there on Industrial. Both of those facilities were existing, change of use. No sprinklers were introduced because of other life safety features that were introduced into the building that would give a higher level of safety. For instance, like a smoke detection system or a fire alarm system within the windstone, and numerous exits accounted for life safety points. So within that existing building code, we can look at things and see what makes sense economically to make that, to repurpose that building.
Thank you. I'm done on sprinklers for tonight, Larry.
Thank you. And I would want to add something on sprinklers too, that I know that the added expense of it, that it could also be looked at as a benefit to people who are potential future renters, that maybe that would be something looked at as a positive, that if you're renting an apartment unit and it has the sprinklers, that it might be like an amenity that currently isn't necessarily available, but it might make it more appealing to people to live there because they know it has that feature. And also the cost and benefit, you know, when you say, well, what is the cost to saving lives? And after going through a fire personally at our business, I have a whole new, I don't know if appreciation is the right word, but understanding and respect for things like that are, nobody ever expects it or whatever. The best you can do is plan for it. And when you think about the example that was given about the woman that, you know, and it happens often, but that could have been, you know, if you go back and ask that developer or that builder or that person or that family if they could do something different, would they? And now we're actually in that position where we can, but none of us knows the lives that would be saved. So I certainly am in full support of that, even though we're not voting on it tonight, that the benefit does exist. And with that, are there further, Councilman Fitzwater?
I said one question. There was some discussion at one of the public hearings in regards to water systems and the infrastructure and being able to be able to handle the new requirements. And I think someone even talked about the current requirements. Are we comfortable that we have the ability to do that?
As far as the infrastructure being sufficient to supply the water demand, that's on a case-by-case basis. So far, Missouri American has been very cooperative with us. A good instance is Capital Region. They replaced a water main there so that they didn't have to use their fire pump. Fire pumps and structures like that are very expensive. It's like $50,000. But they were able to supply a new water main, and they're working with us to replace outdated infrastructure to meet the demands. Public water supply districts on the fringe have been making improvements too, and so we just really need to kind of look at what area is trying to be developed and what the development cost would be for that portion of town. But
any further questions, comments of council? Thank you, Mr. Burkhart, for that presentation. Appreciate it. And also, Mr. Clint, thank you to the Building Code Committee for their 18 months of digging through this and bringing us this recommendation for the council to consider. I would ask, does council, would they prefer a 5-minute break at this point or keep going? Show of hands. I hear keep going. Everybody good? Okay. All right. 20, I guess if anyone needs one, go ahead and take one. 2017-51.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri, authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute an agreement with Double Map in the amount of $318,245.86 to provide equipment and services related to automatic vehicle locators, automatic voice annunciators, and automatic passenger counters.
Mr. Marash?
Thank you, Mayor. And you may have thought you've heard about this before, and you have. This is actually a corrected contract. We had some issues with our contract and needed to work with our provider to get a better contract that we could both live with. And so I think Ryan did a lot of good work getting that done. And so this is corrected, a different version, same cost, same system, just a contract issue correction.
Any questions, comments? 2017-52.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri vacating and discontinuing part of a 10-foot wide utility easement on Lot 2 of Veith subdivision.
Mr. Morash?
Thank you. This will vacate a utility easement, as clerk indicated, but single-family home wanted to build a deck, discovered they had a utility easement that would not allow them to do that. This vacates that. We know it hasn't been used, and we no longer need it.
Any questions, comments? 2017-53.
An ordinance amending Chapter 19 Motor Vehicles and Traffic, Schedule J, Parking Prohibited of the Code of the City of Jefferson, Missouri pertaining to a portion of Tyler Street.
Mr. Morash?
Thank you. This amendment will allow parking again on a portion of Tyler Street. A few years back, a couple that were blind lived in a home and requested that the parking be removed in front of that home. They have since moved, and so there's been a neighborhood request to reinstate that parking.
Any questions, comments? 2017-54.
An ordinance amending Chapter 19 Motor Vehicles and Traffic, Schedule J, Parking Prohibited of the Code of the City of Jefferson, Missouri pertaining to parking on a portion of Myrtle Avenue.
Mr. Morash?
Thank you. This is kind of a cleanup item related to the Elias Sports Complex. When we went back and redesigned the road on Myrtle Street, which is now under construction, we've somewhat narrowed the road and limited some parking on that street, and so this would remove the parking that mainly was used by Elias students, so now they'll have a parking lot to park in. So we wanted to clean that area up, make it visually see better without the parking, and so make it a little safer. So,
Questions, comments? Thank you. 2017-55.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute a $100,000 time and material agreement with Alelco Incorporated for sensory control and data acquisition and programmable logic controller programming, maintenance, and upgrades.
Mr. Morash?
thank you. Very similar to our plumbing contracts, electrical contracts, various contracts we have at the city on call. This one, particular one's with Alelco, as the clerk indicated. We put in a placeholder of $100,000 for parts and labor, but basically they go about and help us repair the technical components at our wastewater plant and pump stations.
Questions or comments? 2017-56.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri amending Chapter 4 of the City Code relating to Sunday sales of alcohol.
Mrs. Miller?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This ordinance primarily amends the alcoholic beverages chapter of the City Code to allow holders of a valid city liquor license to apply to the Board of Liquor Control for an additional license to sell intoxicating liquor by the drink on a single specified Sunday from 11 a.m. through midnight. This amendment also modifies some current code to clarify code language to conform to our current practice granted by state statute relating to annual Sunday sales liquor licenses.
This one has a check mark by for a request to suspend the rules. Do we have a request?
I request to suspend the rules.
Thank you. Are there any objections to suspend the rules? Seeing none, we'll have third reading.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri amending Chapter 4 of the City Code relating to Sunday sales of alcohol.
Thank you. Any council deliberation on the bill? Councilman Mahalovich?
What problem are we resolving? I'm just not sure if I capture that from that.
There was interest, especially with the solar eclipse, for a current liquor license holder to be able to open on Sunday. Currently, we only have annual Sunday sales liquor licenses. So this would be for a Sunday, one-day sales.
Further deliberation? Roll call, please.
Fitzwater.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Henry.
Aye.
Hussey.
Aye.
Kemna.
Aye.
Mahalovich.
Aye.
Ward.
Aye.
Wiseman.
Aye.
Bill passes. Another preparation for the eclipse. 2017-57.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri amending the Fire Department examination and selection procedures.
Chief Schofield?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This bill would allow us to modify our new hire practicing, specifically as we onboard new folks, the written testing procedure. It would allow us to, in advance, take the recommendation of a nationally recognized test vendor and their recommended pass rate. The major advantage to this is that it would allow us the opportunity to test folks and know if they were going to meet that requirement, that written test requirement, and then do their practical testing and potentially their interview testing all at the same time. This makes us more nimble and more responsive to prospective candidates. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? All right. Item 12, bills pending 2017-32.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri, amending Chapter 8 Building Regulations, Article 8 Abandoned Buildings of the Code of the City of Jefferson, Missouri.
Mrs. Abbott?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This bill, as discussed during the last council meeting, has two changes included. One change would allow the city to resecure structures that have been previously ordered for secure. And then the second change would be to institute the utilization of clear carbonate, polycarbonate sheeting, also known as clear boarding, instead of the use of plywood. The staff recommends the use of the clear polycarbonate sheeting, as we feel that it would provide many benefits to the community and to the neighborhoods itself. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions or deliberation? Roll call, please.
Graham.
Aye.
Henry.
Aye.
Hussey.
Aye.
Kemna.
Aye.
Mahalovich.
Aye.
Ward. Wiseman.
Aye.
Fitzwater.
Aye.
Bill passes. 2017-33.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri, amending the 2016-2017 budget by reclassifying one position within the Department of Parks, Recreation, and Forestry, Parks, Resources, and Forestry Division.
Mr. Spalding?
Thank you, Mayor. This bill would be reclassifying our golf course maintenance crew leader to a golf course superintendent, which is a grade 16. Really feeling like we're making our operations a little more efficient. It's industry standard to have someone that has a degree in golf and turf management, and so we feel like this would be a wise move for us. The commission did also approve this at the June 13th commission meeting as well.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, or deliberation? Roll call, please.
Henry.
Aye.
Hussey.
Aye.
Kemna.
Aye.
Mahalovich.
Aye.
Ward.
Aye.
Wiseman.
Aye.
Fitzwater.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Bill passes. 2017-34.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri, authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute a contract with CHC Wellness for providing wellness screenings and wellness program services.
Mrs. Strope?
Thank you, Mayor. This ordinance authorizes a contract with CHC Wellness for wellness program services. The city bid wellness services with the assistance of Wall Street Insurance Company. A committee of employees and personnel of Wall Street interviewed 3 of the responders, and the committee unanimously selected CHC Wellness as the best choice to provide wellness services for the employees of the city. Benefits of CHC Wellness over the other providers include a very user-friendly portal, inbound telephonic coaching and coaching modules at no additional cost. Their website is automated and technologically driven to allow members to upload preventative documents, physician statements, activity verifications, and other materials without any additional cost to the city, or with the city being required to manually enter that information for them or providing the information to a third party to upload for us. CHC's website also includes a financial wellness piece, which is included at no additional cost and is not available with any of the other vendors. Their program syncs with many different activity trackers, just about all the different activity trackers that are out there. Their program is capable of syncing with. Many of the others are very limited. Some of them are only limited to 2 different devices. There is one point of contact with CHC, and the cost is a known cost. The committee had a long discussion about the price and unanimously believed the extra expense is worth the extra benefits and services that is provided by CHC Wellness. We could eliminate the walking portion of the bid, and their price would be equivalent to the other bidders. However, we believe this is an important tool for our program and would like to make it available to our employees. The city's been offering a wellness program for about 10 years, and the cost is included within the budget. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have, and Lee Wilbers with Wall Street is here, and he would also be happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Thank you, Mrs. Strope, and also thank you, Mr. Wilbers, for being here at the meeting this evening. Does council have any questions? Councilman Mahalovich?
I initially had some issues with this on certain levels, but the explanation I was given in another meeting gave me the confidence that this is a good way to go for the city. I just asked that if we had some complaints about the existing vendor, so I hope that as we get complaints, we are able to manage it. And I also hope that our staff take advantage of this program. I think your metric was 60, how many percent?
I think it's about 65%.
64%, yeah. I hope we can have, if with this vendor, we can increase that percentage of use, because that contract, would it stay the same if we had 80% usage?
Well, it is priced at a set price per person that participates in it, and that's how all of them are structured. We actually did set this at a little bit higher than what we had this year. I think we had like 340 participants this year, and this pricing structure is set at 360 participants because we wanted to make sure that we covered that in case we obviously hope that it'll be higher. So if it's not, it actually will be less.
Good, thank you.
Mr. Kroll?
Perhaps just add something to that, though. With increased participation, we would hope to see a decrease on the health insurance side, so.
Any further questions on the bill? All right, roll call, please.
Hussey.
Aye.
Kemna.
Aye.
Mahalovich.
Aye.
Ward.
Aye.
Wiseman.
Aye.
Fitzwater.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Henry.
Aye.
Bill passes, and thank you again, Mr. Wilbers, for being here in person tonight. 2017-35.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri, authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute an agreement with Alelco Incorporated in the amount of $94,680 for the Walnut Pump Station Controls Project.
Mr. Maresh?
Thank you, Mayor. This, again, another contract with Aleco, just over $94,000. Basically, it's a contract for the same type of work, but it's focused on Walnut Street Pump Station. As you might know, most of our pump stations and those kind of facilities are very electronically orientated with talking back and forth with our main plant, and so those many of those are becoming out of date now. Some of them 15 years old, so just like any computer, they need replaced. So we're making an effort to do that with this contract.
Thank you. Any questions, deliberation? Roll call, please.
Kemna.
Aye.
Mahalovich.
Aye.
Ward.
Aye.
Wiseman.
Aye.
Fitzwater.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Henry.
Aye.
Hussey.
Aye.
Bill passes. 2017-36.
An ordinance of the City of Jefferson, Missouri, authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute a $399,785 50-cent agreement with M&M Landscaping and Construction, LLC, for the Basin 14 Relief Sewer West McCarty project.
Mr. Maresh?
Thank you. This is a wastewater contract, but basically we'll be going back and replacing an old sewer main, over 100 years old, on West McCarty Street, and upsizing it. The contractor, we have not had experience with them before, but we did call some references, and they've done similar work in other communities. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, deliberation? Roll call, please.
Mahalovich.
Aye.
Ward.
Aye.
Wiseman.
Aye.
Fitzwater.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Henry.
Aye.
Hussey.
Aye.
Kemna.
Aye.
Bill passes. Item 13, nothing on the informal. Item 14, resolutions, RS 2017-7.
A resolution authorizing an agreement with United Healthcare and Sun Life Assurance Company for group health insurance.
Mrs. Strope?
Thank you. So this resolution authorizes an agreement with United Healthcare and Sun Life Assurance Company for our group health insurance. As you know, each year we bid our health insurance with the assistance of Wall Street Insurance, and we look at the different group health insurance plan options. We currently offer a self-administrated services only self-insured plan through United Healthcare with 3 options for employees to choose between. The Employee Health Advisory Committee recently looked at the various options and feels the best option is to renew our current plan, partnered with Sun Life Assurance Company to provide the reinsurance. This plan will offer almost the same benefit design with an approximate 5% increase in premiums. The one change in plan design is a $100 increase in the individual deductible and a $200 increase in the family deductible within the health savings account plan. This is an IRS regulatory mandate, and it's the only change that's being made to the plan designs. The 2018 premiums fund the claims at the level of expected costs plus 8.8%, which is slightly higher and therefore better, actually, than this year's expected cost plus 5%. There is funding for this in the mayor's approved budget. Again, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have, and also Lee Wilbers is here to answer any questions.
All right, do we have a motion to take up 2017-7? All right, and we'll have any further council discussion or questions? Councilman Mahalovich?
I think it deserves for Lee Wilbers to give us a little bit of review. He's been sitting for 2.5 hours.
Come on up here, Mr. Wilbers. You need to stretch your legs anyway, we know.
I do have a question about turning the money back into the pool and what our balance is there, and what should the balances be in that pool for our employees.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, for letting me be here tonight. I will answer any other questions. Basically, you all are in a self-funded program, so it is partially self-funded. You do have reinsurance, so the reinsurance covers anything over $100,000 on any one employee, and then there's a cap on it. We have been funding it at not at what we call the maximum level. So there's a minimum level that you can pay, which is that would be your fixed cost plus any claims you have. Then there's an expected level, and there's a maximum. So we've been funding at maximum for our expected plus 5%. So the question is how much money do we need in a pool or a fund to go ahead and get us through the good and the bad times? And which is an excellent question. And I'll first state by the idea of having adequate funds is on years where maybe we have real bad years, we can level out and not have a real large increase like we've had in some past years when we've been fully insured. So we recommend probably a minimum of about 6 months of claims, and that would be approximately probably a little less than $2 million. You know, because you're running about $4 million per year. I think currently we have the 400,000. So we're not near even close to what we would consider an amount that we would do. And that was the reason why it was a recommendation from us with the increase we have this year. If we do the 5%, that would bring us from 5% expected plus 5 to an expected plus 8.8% going into.
And I would just add to that we've just started this last year, so we're kind of building up that fund as we're going along. So that's not unexpected, but certainly there's a goal there.
That is correct. I mean, and last year we had probably one of the years that you don't want to have in the first year we did have higher claims than expected. And the other thing I will mention is part of the reason we went into the self-funding, and the recommendation is that we can go ahead and shop the reinsurance. In most years, if we got a big increase and was fully insured, as a city, we had to move carriers. It is very difficult for employees when you move from one carrier to another carrier. It's disruption. Employees do not like that. With the self-funding this year, we was able to take the reinsurance out for bid and get Sun Life to come in and reinsure, but keep United Healthcare, which is the they're doing the administration of it. So so the employees will see really no difference. The employees will be able to continue with their same plan, same doctors, same card they had, so it's very little disruption for your employees.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbers. Any further questions or council deliberation?
Make
Oh,
a comment,
Mr.
and I just
Kroll?
wanted to thank Mr. Wilbers and Gail and the employee committee for all their work. There really is a lot of behind-the-scenes work and analysis and interviews going on, and appreciate all that work, because I think it really showing.
Agreed. Thank you. Mrs. Powell, roll call, please.
Ward. Aye. Wiseman.
Aye.
Fitzwater.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Henry.
Aye.
Hussey.
Aye.
Kemna.
Aye.
Mahalovich.
Aye.
Resolution passes. Item 15, presentations from the gallery on other topics. For 3 minutes on presentations made on other topics. Anyone here this evening to speak? Seeing none. Item 16, council and staff discussion of presentation topics. Item 17, any new business? I do have one that I want to mention. The city is a supporter of United Way. We do have a team. If you notice the castle as you came in the front door, Mayor Snow White and the city dwarfs. And the city is having a goal, and what they would like, if we reach a certain percent of city employees that are giving to the United Way, that Mr. Kroll, the city administrator, will dress up as a character. He doesn't know this yet, but if we reach the goal, he certainly will. So I'm sure, I don't know if it's a...
second to that
I don't know if there's a... I don't know, Snow White, is there a good witch or a bad witch or a dwarf or something? I mean, there's going to be something, and it's going to be good. So what I would ask is that all 10 council members, including myself, that we would all consider giving to the United Way. So at the upcoming council meeting, we'll get details and make sure that all 10 of us count towards that number so that we can see what we're going to make Steve dress up as, that we've already had a motion second, and I think that was unanimous. So other than that, any 17 new business, 18 unfinished business? All right, so I will see you here after the eclipse, right back here on Monday, August 21st at our next
Good
meeting.
hands.
So, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? All right, we are adjourned.